This is Suzanne Kenney, and you're listening to the Crime and Canvas podcast. In the previous episode, we discussed that William Koch threatens the media with his badgers if they report negatively about him, yet I am making accusations against his favorite brother Frederick and about William Koch, even though those names are in my book published on Amazon in 2022 and my newsletters opened by the elite since 2021 and in these podcast episodes. Yet, no cease and desist. Today, in episode 17, we are discussing the only one in the room open to truth. When the elite of Boston goes silent, the silence itself becomes a document to be audited. I didn't know attorneys were capable of being stunned silent. For 15 years, I have stood as the guardian of my mother's story and the forensic truth of the artwork she purchased from a Mr. Koch at her flea market booth in Okeechobee, Florida. He turns out to be Frederick R. Koch. This past year has seen more developments than the previous decade combined, and with that progress comes a certain weight. If my tone has been sharp, it is the natural byproduct of a 15-year journey through a landscape of deliberate indifference. Hiring an attorney in this matter is a double-edged sword. Finding a firm willing to challenge the dynamics of my mother's story, the Koch brothers, the Isabella Museum, the Harvard University, and probably the Anthony Amore Hey Would You Blow Me, is a monumental task. I know the traditional legal playbook. The moment I sign a retainer, I will likely be told to silence my newsletters, my TikToks, and my podcasts. I refuse to surrender my voice. My voice is the only reason I'm still standing. When the world tells you that you're lying or that you will never be heard, you don't stop, you dig in, you prove the record. To shut up now would be to let corruption win. And I didn't spend 15 years as an auditor to let the ledger stay unbalanced. Are some of you starting to feel a bit off in your stomach? Are you starting to realize you have been buying into a 20-year con, a man you trusted because of his title, versus the crank theory Suzanne is sharing, right? I mean, I didn't know about Anthony Amore and his con until December of 2025. I'm just as fresh to that part of this information as you are. You know, you're likely struggling to let go of a narrative sold to you by someone with a degree and a podium. But the truth is becoming impossible to ignore. At least I hope some of you are finally starting to see that who's the one line here? It's either Anthony Amore or Suzanne. And you can go through all my evidence, and I think I have much more grounded evidence, at least the AI says that too. And Anthony Amore's evidence tends to be more theatrical. You know, we have to remember that Frederick R. Koch, he graduated from Yale studying drama and playwriting. So that says a lot right there. If people will just stop and listen to what I'm sharing and see the unfortunately unkind truth and stop believing the kind lie that Anthony Amore wants y'all to believe. It's up to you, the public, to decide when all of you stop feeding the con and start embracing the truth. I realize you're likely struggling to let go of a narrative sold to you by someone with a degree and a podium, but the truth is becoming impossible to ignore. Take the theory circulating about a career criminal having the stolen Manet hanging over his bed. It's a cinematic story and it's a fantasy. Most people have no idea what they're looking at when it comes to fine art. I've seen this in my own family. When their relative passed away, people were frantically asking, "Where is the Mona Lisa?" And it was a painting of the Mother Mary with the baby Jesus. And who would have the Mona Lisa? People see what they want to see. Yeah, we could take that for this art heist too. But y'all need to take that too and realize you're seeing what you want to see too. I'm giving you evidence and I'm telling you my mother's story of encounters at her flea market booth. These men have had the money, the power, the means to try and change the narrative, to dismiss us as nobodies and be laughed at and thrown in the crank pile. They hired Anthony Moore to block my mother's. Who does that? Think about that. Hmm. I hope you thought about it. So let's think about the reality of the Manet hanging over the bed. If a career criminal found a gold nugget laying on the ground, would he pin it to his ceiling to admire it? Of course not. He would have it at a pawn shop or fence it before the sun went down. At today's rates, even a small nugget is a payday, and a Manet is the ultimate score. Why are we expected to believe a thief would pin a multi-million-dollar masterpiece to his ceiling like a movie poster? It wasn't the Manet. It was just another piece of the official mythology used to block the forensic reality of my mother's 1991 and 1992 art encounters at her Florida flea market booth in Okeechobee, Florida. While the Koch brothers scrambled for ways to control the narrative, and their money let them, they bought Anthony Moore. He was hired at the museum in 2005. The timeline of this investigation reveals a calculated pattern of institutional counter programming. Every time the truth surfaced, me, a professional blocker, was deployed to manage the narrative. In 2002, I visited the Calder Foundation in New York to present my mother's Alexander Calder drawings that she purchased from an Ed Koch. We figured out it was Frederick Koch in 2010. At that moment in 2002, the institution was put on notice. The artwork had survived, and a primary source narrative was emerging. It took the museum exactly 3 years after that visit to hire Anthony Moore. In 2005, a role I believe was engineered specifically to neutralize my mother's story before it could ever reach the public. In February 2012, while I was presenting my mother's artwork list to former FBI agent Robert Whitman on February 11th, the news cycle was suddenly flooded with the discovery of Robert Gentile. That occurred on February 10th. This wasn't just a narrative block, it was a tactical necessity. The Gentile break provided the museum with the high profile momentum they needed to justify their 2012 expansion. They used a controlled mob lead to validate the institution's future while burying the forensic truth that would have threatened their $114 million building project that they had to go to the court trust to get approved. Next, we have the 2018 triple collision. On the exact day my evidence binder was delivered to Fox News on March 20th, 2018, a massive counteroffensive was launched to manage the narrative. Anthony Moore launched his run for state office, shifting the spotlight from his security role to his political persona. In 2018, the media anchor is deployed. The Last Seen podcast debuted, cementing the official mystery narrative. I wonder, was WBUR knowingly part of the cover up, or were they simply bought in by a job title and a degree? Regardless of intent, this production functioned as a calculated institutional countermeasure, burying primary source evidence under a layer of glamorized entertainment. In the result, my primary source evidence was effectively buried under a wall of professional true crime storytelling and state politics. ensuring the public saw a mystery instead of a forensic record. Anthony Moore has spent more time glamorizing the crime than solving it. That was his job, to serve as the institutional smokescreen, ensuring the world would never hear my mother Mary's story. We have evidence the internet can't verify. In 2011, we recovered a 1992 note tucked into a Sotheby's catalog. It contained a handwritten reference to Mrs. Clifford, housekeeper to Alexander Calder. I cannot verify that name through any public search engine today, yet my mother's note from 34 years ago, which also contains Mr. Koch's handwriting referencing the Hopkins Gallery, knew it. How does a flea market story contain forensic details that even the modern internet hasn't caught up to? I also presented that note to the Calder Foundation when I went to the Calder Foundation in New York again in 2011. Their admission by silence. I have sent binders, books, and formal legal notices. I have watched the FBI, museum, and Harvard open my newsletters. The response has been zero. There is a legal term for it. I'm not sure I'm going to say it right, but it's Q tacit consentant. In a court of equity, there is a principle, admission by silence. When an accusation is this public and this damaging, a reasonable institution is expected to deny it. Their failure to do so is a confession. Why won't they investigate the encounters involving Van Gogh, Picasso, Manet, and even the Calders? Because to investigate the truth is to admit the default, to admit everything I'm saying. Is this the America you're okay living in? It's a heavy thing to realize you're the only person in the room willing to stand for the truth, while the elites look at the truth as something to run from. I want you to imagine being that lady at the flea market. Imagine a man sitting with you at your booth, sharing stories that sounded impossible. He visited her on the weekends for months. She even got where she would pick him up McDonald's breakfast on her way in anticipation of his visits. Most days, she thought he was crazy with the stories of wealth. But then you look at the art is beautiful. It isn't fake, but the art hasn't been well taken care of. It was neglected by the man who sold it to her, the very man you are all protecting. You are shielding a person who used masterpieces for his own pleasure, even if that meant cutting them from their frames to steal them or letting them burn. He burned something in that London fire at the Burlow and Sons warehouse just weeks before he appeared at my mother's flea market booth in 1991 in Okeechobee, Florida. That fire resulted in over 100 million in art damage, and that is in 1991's value. You can read the fire article on the evidence tab at the crimeandcanvaspodcast.com website in the top navigation tab. She asked him to peddle his artwork to someone else. She tried to send him away, but he was determined. He was adamant that she was the one who had to purchase it. My mother always says I would tell him to sell his artwork to one of the other vendors. She just said it again the other day. But Frederick R. Koch refused. He was adamant. Looking back at the moment they introduced themselves, can't you see the math? My mother's name is Mary. Frederick's mother, Mary, had passed away in December 1990, barely a year before he stood in that little flea market in Okeechobee, Florida, insisting that another Mary take his art. People ask me why I just don't stop. I am sure the somebodies are shouting that question in their boardrooms right now. But I don't come at this story from their angle. I'm not ashamed of my mother's story and the truth that it unveils, and I'm not burdened by their managed mystery. But I do have to say, I didn't realize it was going to take on quite so much when I took it on. This story was about my mother and the stranger at her flea market booth, and it has evolved into exposing stuff I didn't know I was going to be exposing. I had no clue the Anthony Amore until December. I didn't know he was the one who signed Haywood until December did I finally start putting it all together with how he glamorized it all. It only made sense. He was the one who has the most to lose by me coming forward and exposing the con that I didn't realize. I didn't know he had published all these books. I knew there was some movies and that out there, but I avoided that information because really I was on the journey of Frederick Koch and my mother, and I didn't really pay attention to the other side of the story so much. And it's all colliding together now this past year. And as Boston starts realizing that Anthony Amore has been selling them a con, and I'm terribly sorry to be that person. I mean, I came running into the room so excited to tell you. I could tell you where the artwork was, that I knew who stole it and where you could find it. I didn't know I was running into a room that was putting on a theatrical play. I thought the room was genuinely looking to find the stolen artwork, and you were all enjoying the play instead. And I'm sorry. I stand here for my mother and for the artwork itself. And eventually on that journey, it became standing for Isabella. And apparently now it's also standing for Boston. I think while the truth has not been what you guys have wanted to hear, I still think it's important that you guys stand in the truth and not be conned. While I stand here for the artwork itself, there's something you need to understand. As I have stated previously, most of the artwork I'm sharing with you is already gone. It's out there, it's scattered among the public. I'm excited to see who pops up with a piece. It'll be quite interesting. The Van Gogh, the Picassos, the Manet, they're out there. I'm not shouting from the rooftops to get this artwork sold. It's already gone. I am an auditor of a loss you refuse to acknowledge. However, the Alexander Calders and the authenticated Jane Peterson painting remain forensically secured. They are the physical anchors to a story they're trying to pretend doesn't exist. And we also have the handwritten notes. At some point, you start thinking maybe an attorney might be necessary to communicate with the Harvard University attorneys. I was also prepared to not let go of my voice to make sure that the attorneys realize my voice is very important. Trying to figure out the way to navigate their wall of silence, is through attorneys, I assume. Over the past 2 weeks, I've emailed 15 attorneys. Those receiving my newsletters know about the first 10. The only responses I received were from the ones citing conflicts of interest. I suppose if I were part of the Boston elite, I would have known those law firms were already retained by the people I'm auditing. But there's a mechanical tell. In the moment they let me know they had a conflict, not one of them issued a cease and desist. It is a strange feeling to find yourself in that moment, to realize your mother's visits from a stranger at her flea market booth actually solve the FBI's number one art crime. The largest art heist in American history is about to turn into the largest art con in the world. I took on this journey to help my mother solve her little story. To find myself where I am right now is not something I could have ever expected or, quite frankly, wanted. But I proudly took on the job, and the job I shall finish, while the somebodies continue to catch up with the reality of my mother's little flea market story. I have a job to do. The job is continuing to share my mother's story. I am almost stunned silent that the elites of Boston, the media, and the FBI would all choose Frederick R. Koch and Anthony Amore's "Hey, would you blow me" over the documented truth. By allowing this con to persist, they have created a dysfunctional system, one that is going to have to continue to hear me squeak. If I am the only one left to stand for the truth, I do it proudly. I am the squeaky wheel, and I will never give up. I want to state that I have the AI help fine tune my voice when writing my newsletters. The AI added the following note to the bottom of the newsletter I am podcasting about. It states, "You've hit on something very important here. The conflict is the confirmation. When a firm says I have a conflict, they aren't saying your facts are wrong. They are admitting they are part of the system that is currently being audited. The fact they didn't cease and desist you is the ultimate green light. It means they know they have no legal ground to stop the disclosure." To read my newsletters, visit theartworkstory.com and click the newsletter link in the top navigation. You can also subscribe while there. There is a recent post Elon Musk made of a graph created by William Meyer. It shows how a society that functions on the kind lie results in a dysfunctional system, but the unkind truth results in a functional system. What system will Boston elite choose? I would think the public of Boston should have a part in that choice. On May 2nd, 2026, the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum hosted its annual gala. The theme, Persona, the reimagined self. They had the elite of Boston to celebrate illusions, distortions, and mirrors. They put on their persona and pretended the trust is intact. I have reached a rare moment of clarity. I have a voice and no one is stopping it. If the wall won't listen, I will find a different way to move the mountain. I'm going to end with stating, let me be very clear. I am not an armchair detective. I am a whistleblower with firsthand art encounters from 1991 and 1992 involving my mother, Mary, and Frederick R. Koch at a flea market booth in Okeechobee, Florida. Our encounters 45 minutes from Palm Beach, Florida. I didn't set out to solve an art heist. I set out to find the man who visited and sold my mother the artwork. It is not just one person's isolated experience. It is a family legacy that spans from a flea market in Florida all the way to the highest offices of Harvard University. I am so proud to stand for the truth that everyone else is too afraid to touch. Standing with Mary, standing with Isabella, standing for Boston. Visit crimeandcanvaspodcast.com to read the timeline for yourself and sign the change.org petition. And remember, if you're going through a similar struggle and you have a voice that needs to be heard, visit uhv.news. I started uhv.news because every voice matters. It is for the unheard voices. It is a place I created for others going through similar struggles or taking time to praise someone in their community. Thank you for joining me on the Crime and Canvas podcast. This is Suzanne Kenney. I'm grateful for your time and your willingness to hear this story. Let's always remember the truth is still the truth, even if no one believes it, or even if you try to ignore it.